Yeah, yeah. Unashamed, unafraid. I'm trying to walk the walk. Truth on the mic, no shame here, just real talk. Came from the outside, never fit in. Now we tell the story and the healing begins. No front, no mask, just telling the truth. Keep it real, keep it raw, speaking straight from the booth. If you feeling like an outsider, this one's for you.
Welcome to another episode of Unashamed Unafraid. We are unashamed of sexual addiction recovery and unafraid of coming unto Christ for healing. Chris has got his I Love Jesus socks. We've got Joshua in the house, and we're ready to record another Live Unashamed episode. What are we talking about, guys?
Story. The impact of story, sharing your story, how we connect with story.
This podcast originally started on the idea that sharing a story will help combat the shame that drives sexual addiction. That's what we are. That's what we do. Unashamed Unafraid is a story podcast. The reason why that matters is because when you don't tell the honest story, the true story, the raw, vulnerable story, shame creeps in. Things that are taboo in society are just things that no one tells their story about. Mm-hmm. Things that have shame surrounding them in society are things that no one tells their story about.
Yeah.
They're things we keep quiet because it's easier not to share. And so when someone will come in and just rip that tag off and just say it how it is and tell their story,
yeah,
the courage and the authenticity and the vulnerability, it breaks that shame.
And people will feel disconnected when they're not sharing the story, when they're not talking about it, because that's how we connect to each other, right? When we get together, what are we doing? We're always telling stories, right? We're talking about these epic adventures that we went on. Like, I just got back from hiking down to Bryce Canyon and the cool adventures down there, and it's like 29 degrees, and me and my wife are out there until midnight snapping photos in the freaking dark, and she is scared to death. Right? We're talking about all these like stories, and everybody's like interested in and hearing the stories, and that's how we connect. Yeah. Right? And when we're looking for ways to get out of the shame, ways to find recovery, sharing your story of like, hey, this is where I'm at, this is what's going on for me. Instead of being isolated, I'm just going to keep it to myself and just be alone. And then I'm going to feel disconnected and then wonder why I still act out.
Listening to you guys, I had a thought that the shame, the reason we don't tell our stories is because we've been listening to the lies for so long.
Yeah.
And we believe them. But if you sit down and go over your story, you see the truth in a different way. And you can have grace for yourself to look past those shame scripts and see things for how they really are.
The point where everything changed for me in recovery, where I actually felt like I started making progress, it was almost 3 years ago. It was January of 2023. When I sat down over the course of 3 or 4 months and I wrote out my story, and I wrote out everything that had ever happened to me. And those things that I didn't want to put down on paper are the things that I especially included.
Those are the things that are the hardest to write down are the things that have the highest potential to help you heal.
Yeah. And so I included all of that stuff, and I started going, and then I would miss one thing and I would go back and I would edit that section, and I wasn't consistent about it at all either. Like, I mean, I'll tell you, I spent 20 minutes a day, but really I spent like 3 hours every other week, you know? I just was not a consistent person at that point in my recovery, right? A little bit more so now, but definitely not back then. But I was just doing the best I could to get it out so that I could process it. And that's what's cool is like everyone has to get in touch with their story at some point because God puts that inside of you. Like if you think from the very beginning, you go back to Adam and Eve. Why did God command prophets to write that in scripture so that we could have it? Because of the power of story. We need to know where we came from. We need to know what happened to us. We need to know where we're going. Those things are freeing, they're healing, they change us, and they give us hope. That's what started to happen to me as I got this all out on paper. I remember just sitting in the BYU library, bottom floor, like tucked away in a corner, just sitting there at a computer typing and just like sobbing. Because I just hadn't ever actually told anyone these things out loud. I don't do 12 steps anymore. It's not really my chosen method of healing, but the time I had a sponsor, I was working the steps, and it was so helpful for me, that portion of recovery. I really needed the steps. And I called my sponsor, and I asked him, hey, can I read you my story? So we scheduled like one Saturday, and it took an hour and a half, and then we were only halfway through it.
Dang.
Then the next Saturday, we started again, and it took an hour. So it was 2.5 hours straight of me telling the story of how I became who I became, and the sexual shame and the experiences that defined my relationship with others and my relationship with God and my relationship with myself, and the fear and the pain and the sadness and the reasons why I felt like I couldn't be myself and why I felt like I wasn't free to be a kid, and how I learned to numb instead of fighting for emotional safety in my life. And I remember at the end of that conversation, the second conversation, my sponsor was like, dude, no wonder you became an addict.
You didn't stand a chance.
Yeah, you didn't stand a chance. And that's no excuse to live in addiction the rest of my life, but it was freeing because I understood what had happened to me, that I didn't have to take on the identity of being a problem anymore. It was like, no, I'm not a problem. I just experienced things that I didn't know how to deal with as a kid. I didn't think there were other options. I was thinking with a 6-year-old kid brain when that thing happened to me. And I decided what that meant about my long-term identity with a 6-year-old brain or a 10-year-old brain or a
Totally.
13-year-old brain.
So I got a cool thing to thinking about your story and having that lined out with all the pages and stuff. Do you still have it?
Yeah.
Did you do another in a timeline kind of, or can you put it in a timeline?
It's like, I mean, it's in themes, right? Like sexual shame, but like those are themed by time period of life because certain things kind of happened between those periods. So it's like early life, adolescence, early 20s, stuff like
Totally.
that.
Okay. I'll invite anybody that's listening to do this as well. When I did this, it was super powerful. If you've ever done your 4-step inventory and you really nailed down your whole story of all the details for like a full disclosure or whatever that is, lay it out on a timeline. You lay that on the bottom half of it, and then on the top half, then write in what were the positive things that happened to you in your life during that time. What were the good things that happened to you? Because what it does is it helps remind you that there's still good things that happen to you. Because you can look back on your life, man, I had a shitty life. I had a hard life growing up and everything. And I could look at it that it was a shitty life, but I'm like, I loved my childhood. I still had an awesome childhood. My wife is looking at me going, how can you think that? All this stuff happened to you. And I'm like, it's my perception of how I see it.
Yeah.
And so going and doing that, and so the top part is just all the positive things that have happened to you in that lifetime. And dude, it's really cool to see how they interact. I noticed that right after my dad took his life, I got really deep into my addiction with having sex with women. Obviously, I was 17, right? And so when that happened, I didn't realize that it got really deep right after my dad took his life. I had no idea that I got deeper into it until I laid it out on the timeline. Then I looked at like all the positive things that were happening at the same time, and throughout the whole thing, I mean, it just opened up my eyes to so much. I'm like, man,
Well, I bet you that's when
I could see God in every single aspect of my life, even when I thought it was like horrible and the things I was doing, and He hates me. Just being able to see that, I was like,
God still got you even when it don't feel that way.
He does love me, and it's so freaking cool. So I'd invite you and anybody else to do that. That'd be cool to hear what your experience would be.
For a while, I beat myself over the head with the parts of my story that I thought were the only true parts, which were the positive parts, right? I think that's a way that shame would try to beat me, because if my childhood really was that good and I really did have that much support and that much fun, and I was, such a high achiever and all that, then what's wrong with me, right? And so I had to let go of that piece to get out that part of my story that I couldn't tell for a while. But now I'm in a spot where I'm like, dude, I would love that. That would be so helpful for me to finally integrate those two stories, I think that's part of my recovery that I have left to do. How do I get the full story?
Yeah.
I finally got out the part of my story I couldn't talk about, and I started healing it, and now I can see the full picture. I don't know that I've ever really gone back.
It's
to
funny, we've
integrate
never even
those
talked
things.
about that on this podcast.
Yeah.
Like, I've never even brought that up ever.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, the
God
12
knows
steps,
what's up, man.
12 steps does say to write the good and the bad, but
Yeah.
you do tend to lean towards the bad
Yeah.
when you're writing that out.
So, Josh, why have you decided to share your story? Like, I know we had you on the podcast, you and your wife, and I know your story touched a lot of hearts in that, your wife and everything. So, I mean, just hearing from meeting with guys at boot camp, and they're like, man, Josh's story was so dope, and it was so good. They're like crying. No, I'm not kidding, man. Dude, I get this stuff all the time when I go. And this is who impacted me. I've had guys walk into my office, dude, ready for a coaching session, and they're like, that podcast that Josh just did? And they start crying, and they're like,
You're going to make me cry right
because
now.
I
You
start
got to
crying
stop,
too,
man.
It just,
Oh, jeez.
and they're like, in fact, I know one of the guys, he walked in and he goes, I never got to that point where I wanted to die like Josh did. And it just got me. And he just starts bawling. Your story impacts people, right? And that's why we share stories, is it can provide hope for other people. So for you, man, like, why share your story?
So I found this podcast because my neighbor was the audio guy. He told me about it, and I just fell in love with it right away.
Darth Vader of audio.
Call out to Jason, my boy. And yeah, so I've told this before, but I loved listening to it. And it was funny. I recognized one day, I was like, I could tell you probably 80% of everyone's story before they say it. Almost everyone who comes on to tell their story, I mean, we all have sexual addiction. Almost all of them are members of our church. Almost all of them grew up and saw something when they were on the internet, whatever, I could tell you the story. They thought that it was going to get better when they got married. It didn't. They tried to clean up before they went on their mission. It's all the same. And I was like, why do I love it so much when every story is like the same thing, beat for beat? But I just listened to it all day, 10 hours a day. I was working 10 hours a day listening nonstop. And I loved it. And then I was like, it's because it's my story, but theirs has a happy end. And that's what I said to myself over and over and over. And one day I was at work with a friend of mine who we had this super open, vulnerable conversation about recovering from pornography addiction. And I was telling him about this podcast, and I just told him that same thing, that same message that I'd been telling myself. I love this podcast because their stories are like my story, but theirs has a happy ending. And then the Spirit just smacked me across the face and said, so does yours. And I just started crying. And then the guy I was working with was like, why are you crying? I'm crying now. What's going on here? And I was like, dude, I just realized that my story has a happy ending too. And yeah, man, the hope that comes from being vulnerable and sharing authentically with people the hardest parts of your life is so healing. It is so powerful to be able to share that with someone, or to have someone share that with you. Changed my life. This podcast has totally changed my life. And it's a podcast of stories.
Changed my life too. Just being on here, it's something that when temptations come in, I'm like, that's not for me. That's not who I am anymore. I'm different now. And our listeners deserve better for me. And I deserve better than to act out. So I'm like, not for me. It's sharing my story, not just on the podcast, but sharing my story across the world has been something that has absolutely helped me continue to find sobriety over and over again. Playing it all the way through, and I'm like, no, I can lose so much. I don't want to lose what I've got. And I want to be able to provide hope, because God, He changed me. He made me who I became, who I am now, and He changed everything about me and helped me, guide me into finding the sobriety that I needed to, finding recovery finding the people, putting people in my life over and over again when I just felt like I was worthless. And why send anybody to me? Because I don't deserve this. And he's like, no, I got people for you. And you're going to share your story and be a facilitator of changing hearts. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Like, I don't have any sobriety. He's like, no, I got some stuff for you. And when I had the opportunity to be able to share my story, LDS.org asked us to go on a video that was going to go worldwide. And I was like, what are you talking about? They're like, yeah, there's not going to be any anonymity. It'll show your face. It'll be your voice, everything. And we're going to use it around the world. And we're like, hey, I don't know about this. And I called my brother. And in the scriptures in the LDS culture, we have scripture called Doctrine and Covenants. And my brother read a scripture in there, and it talked about how great is it that you bring one person to me, but how great is your glory, or some along the lines of like, how great is your
shall
glory
be your
when you
joy
bring
with them in the kingdom of my Father, if you should
multiple
bring
people.
one soul unto me.
So he
Even
reads that to
more
me.
If you bring more, right?
Yep. So he reads that to me we're just talking on the phone. And because I was like, I have this opportunity to be able to do this. And he reads that scripture to me because I'm scared. I'm like, no anonymity. Like, what the heck? And he's like, Chris, you will never know the hearts and the people that you change. He's like, until you get up to heaven and you're going to be sitting there and somebody's going to come up and wrap their arms around you that is across the world. And they're going to say, you changed my life. He's like, I don't know about you, but I think this is something that God's calling you into. I'm like, God help me this far. I can I'll do anything for him. And so I was like, okay, here we go. And I was scared, man. I was so scared to have that and have my face out there. And then the response that we got from people, because I was just scared of like, what is this going to do to my kids? Are they going to be shunned? Or, I'm scared to death of what people are going to see, how they're going to see me now. The response was unbelievably awesome ever since. Been absolutely amazing. People will have stopped me in the store, and they're like, hey, were you on this video? And it happened numerous times, and it's been so awesome. And I'm like, God, I would do anything for you because of what you did for me, just in changing my life and helping me and Autumn get to where we're at. I mean, in March, I get to celebrate 29 years with Autumn. Back then, if she would have literally said, I would divorce you, I'd have been like, okay, would have walked away. But God had other plans. He's like, I got you. And I'm going to take you places. And he has. And just trusting God. We just did an episode of trusting God, and that was just one of the things, just trusting God. And, okay, I'm sharing my story, God. Here we go. I don't know what's going to happen, but let's see what happens. And he did.
Sometimes you just need to know that there's someone else who has a similar story as yours, except theirs had a happy ending.
Yep.
And that means yours can too. Dude, first 12-step meeting I ever went to, Chris Bennett. He's my facilitator. I remember you told your story. You're at that place, you're 18 years sober now. At that point, you were 8 years sober, so this is 10 years ago when I met you. And you're like, yeah, I'm 8 years sober. This is what I've done to achieve recovery. This is the kind of person I become. These are the kind of rules I live by. This kind of discipline and discipleship that I have in my life. And there's just something different about you. I was like, I could be like that guy someday. I could. It gave me a lot of courage to keep going. So it's the hope in the story, man. It's the hope in the story. That's why we tell the stories. And my story's not finished yet. Joshua's story's not finished yet.
My story's not finished yet.
Chris's story is not finished yet.
There's some massive parts of my story just beginning, and for anybody out there listening to this right now, there's a happy ending for you too. It's up to you. You can build it. You can design it however you want, but I suggest you don't do it alone.
Anything's possible with
God.
two people as long as one of them is Jesus.
I love that. That's good.
Shout out to Joshua Stover. That's his phrase.
Like, yeah.
Guys, we want to hear your stories. If you're in a spot right now where you feel like you're in recovery and you've experienced some healing and you feel like you have something that would bring hope to people, we want to hear your story. Shoot me an email, sam@unashamedunafraid.com, and we'll get you on the podcast. if you're at a point in recovery where you haven't talked to anyone about your story, you haven't shared your story, you haven't written down your story, do the work to get your story down.
Send us your story. Even if we're not putting it on the podcast, if you just feel like you need to share your story with one of us, like, shoot us an email. I'll listen to your story.
Guys, thanks for watching. Find us on social media at Unashamed Unafraid. You can get access to our bonus content and become an outsider on unashamedunafraid.com. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if this was helpful to you, it'll probably be helpful to someone else. So take some time right now and share it with a friend. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, continue to live unashamed.